Have you ever heard of the show Mosaic from Nickelodeon 2002? This chances that you have are slim because the show was canceled after airing the 6 20-minute episode. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, let me explain. Miss Mosaic is an educational children's show. Please keep in mind that this isn't one of those cliche lost episode crap stories that has the static and blood and gore, blah blah blah. This Mosaic isn't even close to those cheesy horror stories you find scattered across the internet, and I'm certainly not begging you to believe me all of that crap. If you want to look it up, Miss Mosaic is a woman, obviously, who is made out of small colored square stones. It wasn't animated, mind you, it was stop motion. Miss Mosaic was elegantly move and dance, and her voice is quite literally an angel chorus. She wore a blue sky belly dresser-like clothes and golden jewels decorating her graceful body. Her caramel skin seems to shine more than all of the other small stones. Her eyes were deep, dark sea blue, and her voice sequence followed each word that poured out of her lips perfectly. Even if you hate educational shows, you'd be in awe on how the show was done with the utmost care. It seemed to be cherished by the employees who worked on it. Nonetheless, the show seems extremely entertaining between the ages between 3 to 12. In fact, parents reported that their children were addicted to the show. The parents would claim that their child would gain great knowledge and immediately that the major show would skyrocket to the top of the list. So why? Why would they cancel the show? It was perfectly produced. The artwork of Miss Mosaic was stunning and the music was absolutely great. Miss Mosaic would teach children fun math problems and had them sing with her while dancing and jumping. Like I said before, there isn't any graphic, violent scenes or static that appears in the show. In fact, none of the stones ever had the color red in them. Around episode 4, the popularity of Miss Mosaic was booming and still growing. All the reviews were all 5 stars, always holding similar descriptions. Wow, my daughter loves this! Or, my kid don't even watch cartoons anymore and they read books all the time, and so forth. After episode 4, parents were starting to show concern. Okay. Families were calling Nickelodeon complaining that their child only spoke topics such as science. No, why you asked? Why, now you might ask that, is it a bad thing? Well, the parents of the children continued saying that their child would gaze at their food and not even take a small bite out of it. Began murmuring numbers and words. The child's voice would grow louder and louder until the parents would hear it clearly. The child would be rambling about gravity and human anatomy, and even saying things on how many heartbeats we might have left until we disturbingly enough die. The child would tell his parents or his or her parents how many breaths we take when we sleep, and the list goes on. The child would speak gibberish, even if that's the most intellectual parents that didn't understand. The child would continue this for about a minute before shutting their mouth completely. Just like that. Now, what would you expect, right? You probably thought the child was going to start screaming at the top of their lungs and their eyes would be crying blood or something like that. No. They just stopped and went back to normal. Yes, the child went back to his or her average self. When their parents asked on what their outburst was, they only replied with a soft smile, nod, and would only say these few words. Miss Mosaic taught me! Whenever the parents would ask again, the child would ignore the topic entirely. Majority of the Nickelodeon already thought about canceling the show. But of course, you know you have the assholes that work for Nickelodeon. Unfortunately, these good-for-nothing jerks will rant and bash about the creator until they drive him or her to insanity. And it seemed that the other employees went along with it. I'll admit, Nickelodeon did pull a douchey move, and they also pulled another one. They complained about their website that the calls never occurred. Yes, they completely put the incidences in the back of their mind. There were only around 20 unusual calls about the children's outbursts. So of the dull-minded fans believed Nickelodeon's lies. There weren't any calls like that ever again, and the show continued like nothing had ever happened. Even the employees seemed to believe that the incident never happened. Due to the lack of conversation about it, Miss Mosaic would be aired on national television every Wednesday. And it barely cost any money because Miss Mosaic's set was medium budget. And due to the fact that there was only one camera pointing towards Miss Mosaic and the Mosaic size sky behind her. And that was it, of course. There would have to be hundreds and hundreds of frames put together and such, but nonetheless the animators enjoyed it, but the voice actor for Miss Mosaic was happy with her job, and everything seems to be perfect. Episode 5 was like any other episode where Miss Mosaic taught the young viewers how to twirl and sing the ABCs. Mind you, of course, adults could sit in the room and watch the show with their child. Adults claimed that Miss Mosaic would said these words, "Let's play hide and seek." She would gleefully yell. The children would hide somewhere in the room, and usually in a nook or a cranny. A big smile plastered on their faces as they peered out from their hiding spots to see Miss Mosaic looking around the screen, searching for the hider. She would completely oblivious to the adult or the teenager present in the room. In fact, it seems that she tried to her very best not to even look for the people from ages 13 and above. Then, after a few minutes, she would open her mouth and say, "Gotcha!" She would say it in a victorious tone as she pointed towards the hiding spot of the child. The child would proceed to come out of their hiding spot, and the show would go on normal. If you didn't analyze what I just said, let's overview it really quickly. How did Miss Mosaic know where the child was hiding? Miss Mosaic began gathering horror gurus everywhere after that, and the rumors and the stories were spreading like a plague. These occurrences in the shows were just too strange and out of this world. Those are the only words that can describe this show. There were also countless stories of Miss Mosaic would come out of the TV and brutally murder the children. No one believed the hide-and-seek scene, except for the people who saw the episode, which surprisingly, at very little. Miss Mosaic played very early, mind you, and the adults were probably getting ready for another day of work. I didn't even notice that Miss Mosaic played on days where children didn't even have to go to school, or when their families were busy working. Miss Mosaic was quickly becoming famous in the horror community. Again, everything went back to normal. The episode only aired once. For some reason, I never knew why they even played only one episode every Wednesday. Then, episode 6 finally came out after a long wait, and the curious minds that wanted to investigate didn't miss the opportunity to see an episode of Miss Mosaic, because they fully knew that they only had one chance of viewing the episode. Midway through the episode, Miss Mosaic halted her tracks, and so did the children. She just stood there and stared at the camera. She wasn't completely motionless, just like in real life when someone is staring at someone else. Her face twitches, their eyes drift around, and their eyebrows move slightly. That's what Miss Mosaic was doing. And at this point, the elder people in the room became concerned by the fact that their children was just standing there, eyes fixed on the screen. There had been cases where the child was originally sitting down watching the show, but when Miss Mosaic mysteriously stopped, the child's expression would drop and they'd stand up. Miss Mosaic's eyes darted around as she would try to stare at the thousands of viewers at the same time. She would purse her lips and clamp her jaws shut. Then her neutral expression would turn into a frown, and her mouth would slowly open, revealing the rotten, sickly yellow teeth which she did not have before. She would then try to crack her neck, not in a inhuman way, She did the motions when we wake up in the morning, moving our heads and shoulders in an attempt to crack our cramped necks. After she did, there was a loud, sickening crack. She gritted her teeth, scraping them against each other as she began scratching her body in the most crooked way possible. Yet she kept that acknowledgence, and her movements were those of a snake. She trembled, and slowly the small mosaic stones, paint chipped off and became dull, revealing thin cracked stones beneath those once colorful patterns. By now, she had a look of a pure anger formed on her now pale face. Her cheeks were sunken and her eyes were slightly swollen and bloodshot. The children were still locked into the place. The soundtrack for the show was barely audible. There was pain in her eyes. Then, with a snap of her neck, she smiled, or tried to. Her broken, parched lips made smiling look painful. She tilted her head in her normal soft voice. Miss Mosaic daily lessons. How to heal sick people, she joyfully announced. The children who once frozen would all sudden start laughing and jumping. Miss Mosaic would instruct the child to poke her on the forehead. She still kept her decayed appearance all along the way. You could even imagine that the older person who was present was absolutely terrified to the brim. However, witnesses claimed that an unknown force made her muscles clench and a knot formed their stomachs and squeezed. If they tried to stand up or run towards the child to get them the hell out of there, they couldn't. If they tried, their bodies would feel strained. Finally, the children poked Miss Mosaic's head in a split second. She reverted back to her normal appearance. The children didn't get sucked in or anything like that. Miss Mosaic was indeed healed. After that, the people from age 13 or to above would be fully back in control. This time, Nickelodeon wouldn't try to ignore the incident or cover it up. Like before, phone calls flooded the Nickelodeon studios. They officially knew Miss Mosaic was screwed. However, they admitted that no one made Miss Mosaic do those things. The healing scene was 11 minutes and 13 seconds in length. When Nickelodeon staff went to the period of time to the episode to check, nothing odd showed up. Even though they proved that the scene never happened, they still had no choice but to shut down Miss Mosaic due to the lack of viewership and demanding parents. And just like that, the show went off air. Sure, people still talked about it. It seemed that Miss Mosaic went in the back of our minds, and of course, horror stories covered Miss Mosaic so completely that everyone thought it was a hoax. Nickelodeon had countless arrays of new shows to air anyway, so they had no problem losing one show. One of my friends, who was a victim to Miss Mosaic, had to watch her daughter stand and poke the forehead of what seems to be a monster. But she told me that their child never spoke of Miss Mosaic again. But she told me that one thing I can never forget. At first, I thought she was just joking, but with this look of sincerity on her face, she told me otherwise. She said that one night, when she was going back home from another day of work, she fell down a small, bumpy, sharp hill and got injured in the process. When she was home, her husband immediately put her in bed, and she was bedridden. When she fell asleep, she told me that she woke up in the middle of the night. She told me that the dimly lit room, illuminated by the moonlight, she could see the figure of her daughter holding one finger, her other hand hanging loosely, as she could even vaguely make out the shape of the bottle of the pills in her hand.